so happy and positive, and it's all he knows too. So we just, like he always says.
Yes, I coughed, and it's because this damn cold just won't go away. I've been fighting it off for the past week, and while it hasn't fully come, it just won't fully go away. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Differently Wired Show. My name is Max Derrat, as I'm sure you're all very familiar. And in case you're wondering why I just said that, yeah, it's because I don't know, maybe if you're listening to this live, you'll probably heard this. If you're listening to the audio version of this later, yes, I did cough right when the stream went live. I can't. It's cold up here in Canada. It's raining all the damn time. All the kids aren't supposed to be going out for Halloween tomorrow because there's going to be a huge swath of heavy rain coming over. So give me a break. Depressurization and all that crap. Uh, anyways, you guys don't care about that. So yeah, I did introduce myself, and joining me as always, sitting to my immediate left, right, center, binaural audio joke insert here. He is PhD. You can tell by the way he uses his walk, he's a woman's man. Come on, John. What do you?
Good evening, Max.
You're supposed to say no time to talk. Okay. Anyways, I guess you're not a BG fan. He is John Tucker. John, how's it going?
Great, thank you.
Great. All right. I was just joking. So yeah. Oh my God, I'm not feeling that great today. But we'll power through it. I'll just do the usual stuff as you guys are all accustomed to. Yes, we have Facebook page, yada yada yada. Link in the description box below. Make sure you go and like it. Discord server. Oh yeah, we have a couple of new things that I got to tell you guys about in regards to our Discord server. So, as some of you are familiar with, I got to update the way this picture so that it sort of gets across some of these new changes. As some of you are already aware, if you are part of the Discord server, we do have a role over there. I'm gonna assume you guys know what I mean by role if you've been on the internet at all and have used Discord. A role for listeners. What listeners are basically is people that join the server and want to be a helpful ear for people that might be going through some stuff in regards to their mental health or in regards to autism or whatever. Well, we just upgraded our sort of system regarding listeners. They're no longer called listeners, they're called the Support Squadron. Thank you very much, Lord Galvatron, for suggesting that name. And once you get there, if you actually just need somebody to talk to about whatever's on your mind, you'll be able to see in one of the text chats on the left, you'll be able to see support. What is it called? Let me just bring it up real quick. Support Squadron, Support Staff Bios. That's what it's called. And once you click on there, you'll be able to see bios for the various listeners. You can match yourself up with whoever you think will be able to help you out the best. And as always, we're always looking for anybody that's willing to volunteer to be a listener. I'd love to talk to any of you guys. Just feel free to direct message me or direct message one of the moderators if I'm not immediately around. So that way we can bring you onto the server, make you a part of the team, and continue to make the server the most wholesome place on the internet, as one of our regular listeners, Nick, likes to call it. With that out of the way, oh yeah, I do have a Subscribe Star page. Just to remind you guys, if you aren't familiar with what Subscribe Star is, it's like Patreon. It's a service where you can support your favorite creators. I just choose to use Subscribe Star because I find that Patreon tends to do a lot of shady and ethical stuff behind the scenes. So if you like the work that I do here on my channel in regards to my standalone videos, or you like the stuff that John and I do in regards to mental health and autism and the Differently Wired show, please consider donating over there. There's various rewards that you guys can receive. How many tiers are there? There's $1, $2, $5, 10, 20, and 40, and all with increasing rewards as they go along. One of the rewards that I've neglected to mention the past few weeks since the Subscribe Star campaign started is that if you join at $2, that's $2 a month. One of the rewards that you can get is you can be a part of the after show chat. Yes, we do have an after show for the Differently Wired show. And all you have to do is sign up on Subscribestar for $2 a month. Let me know through Discord that you've, or through the private messaging app on Subscribestar that you are supporting me at that level, and I will give you the role of Subscribestar supporter on Discord, and then you will have all these chats open to you. So that way we can hang out after the show. I figure like this is a more efficient way of me being able to hear from you guys instead of relegating people's concerns or wanting to talk during the call-in segment, which we used to do here, to like 8 or 10 minutes max. I can have a full hour for all of you guys. And I think that is about it. John, you want to jump right into the main topic?
Sure.
All right. Well, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Black and white thinking.
Right, black and white thinking. So I'm going to address this right after I clear my damn throat. Excuse me.
Well done.
Oh, yeah. John. Yeah, actually what's interesting, John, is that you heard that. Nobody else could hear that because I muted myself on OBS and not with my mic. I guess I should.
Very well done.
I guess I should have done that with my mic. Yeah, I had a really good shepherd's pie before dinner. It's, yeah, anyways, I'm not going to get into all those gross details. Black and white thinking. This was suggested to us by one of our regular listeners. His name is Jonathan. We read an email from him last week, and he suggested this among a plethora of different topics that we could potentially talk about in the future. Or I prefer to talk about them during the Differently Wired show, but maybe I could do a standalone video on them at some point in the future. But one of the things that he suggested was black and white thinking. When he suggested this, I was like, yeah, of course. Why haven't we talked about this? It's such a fundamental element of being human, and it's something that tends to come out in a unique and exaggerated way from time to time among the Differently Wired community. So we'll get into all of that, but before we do, I figure I'd just start off talking about the subject by asking you, John, like when you hear the phrase or the term or whatever, black and white thinking, obviously it comes out in many different ways among many different types of people. Well, I would give examples, but I just sort of wanted to ask you, like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Like, what type of person, what type of black and white thinking?
Well, you know what bounces into my mind? I'm getting a lot of this lately with parents very concerned about their child. Their child is not behaving the way they were behaving or the way they think one ought to behave, so they think his life is over. He smoked marijuana or he plays video games or something, and they don't understand. And their thinking is, well, this is not normal. He's going to be a failure. And they may not be differently wired. They may just be very concerned about social norms or expectations. And I do see it also in cultures where there's a cultural clash. People are living in a different kind of environment, and mores and rules and cultural things are different. So they say, oh, my daughter is, talking to boys. She'll go to hell. It's like.
Really? That's actually happened?
I see it a lot. Kind of, yeah. Yeah. It's, and so it can have a huge number of problems. Like, okay, say a person's having trouble with school. So, oh, I'm not getting through school. My life is over. I can't do anything. I'm a mess. I'm this, I'm that. All kinds of opportunities are missed. All kinds of mood effects are created by you locking yourself into one hard-end position. Now, a little bit later on, we can talk about some ways around that, but it's really a big topic. I am surprised we didn't actually mention it before. So thank you, Jonathan, for bringing that up. And the other thing about black and white thinking is that it can lead to, and it can be caused by anxiety. In other words, you can create a spiral, a downward spiral with, oh, if I don't do this, oh, what if I can't do this? And then you get all kinds of negative impacts that are almost imaginary to start with, and then they become real.
Yeah, it's what you just said there about anxiety being the thing that produces black and white thinking. That's sort of when I think about it. It's the first image that pops into my mind whenever somebody utters black and white thinking. It's when you're in that sort of primordial anxious state where you're confronted with something that you don't know how to deal with. Sorry. You don't know how to deal with that. Your brain sort of takes on that fight, flight, or freeze mentality, and
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
happens involuntarily. Um, it's actually another reason why I was particularly excited to make this a topic for uh, today's show is because out of all the various symptoms that come as part and parcel of mental health problems or autism related problems, the one thing that I personally struggle with the most is black and white thinking. Now, you guys might be like, well, Max, that doesn't make a lot of sense because when I watch some of your videos, you tend to try and give credence to all different sides of any argument that you take on, or like any argument that you present. And that's true. But let me just repeat what John was alluding to a second ago. Once you're in that anxious state, it's such a terrible place to be that you will essentially do anything that you can in order to get out of it. And that's sort of hard to understand for certain people because when they think about that type of mindset, it only comes as a product of some sort of physical pain, right? Like if somebody's punching you in the face, the first thing that you want to do, the only thing that you're really focused on is having that stop. Um, but it's actually something that tends to uh, that affects people mentally, right?
I'd
So
like to pick on. Oh, sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, go ahead, please.
All right. Something that caught my attention, what you said. Um, yes, credence to all sides in your videos. Notice that that is a rational thing. That comes from the front of your brain. That comes from the rational part of your brain where you weigh things in a calm way, and you have time when you're creating the videos. You review things and you look at them logically. That's not driven by emotions the way something that creeps up on you and affects a different part of your brain. So the darn thing is with the lower brain influences, the fight, flight, freeze kinds of influences, that they hijack the front of your brain. That stops you from thinking because now you're into protecting, like you say, smash in face. But the different part of the brain is important to acknowledge because in a way you can use the front to help you out of the back.
Mm,
You can, as Paramahansa Yogananda says, worry is a psychophysical state of consciousness in which we're caught in feelings of helplessness. I think I may have read that last week. Um, you're caught in helplessness. You've got to step back from the emotional state, and black and white thinking and anxiety are wrapped up together very tidily here. You've got to step back from that state and go back into the rational part, insofar as you can. Sometimes it's too difficult to do, but there are ways. Everybody has different little ways to draw back and pause and calm down, or count to 10, or breathe out, or whatever kind of works for you. That you can then recruit other sections of your brain.
mm. Yeah, so that's one thing that an aspect of this conversation that I sort of really want to focus on today, because as I just said, black and white thinking is something that tends to affect me quite greatly. So I suppose as a way of sort of getting into that conversation, I can sort of pose a scenario that you guys can relate to, and then we could sort of build off of that for discovering ways that we can deal with black and white thinking. So. I think I'll just sort of follow a pattern that was established on last week's show, where I was sort of using examples from my own life in order to in order to build the conversation forward. So, for example, John, one thing that I'm particularly self-conscious about when it comes to YouTube is my voice. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the sound of it, but the texture of it. And what I mean by that, sometimes when I read some of the comments on my videos, I get comments from people saying that they can't stand the way that when I talk, they can hear sort of the saliva in my mouth clicking, right?
Hmm.
And that sort of got under my skin because it's like, okay, well, it's not that the criticism got under my skin. I try to respond and take in criticism, constructive criticism, as best I can and try to remedy it. The problem is this particular thing I've tried to remedy, just not much success. Well, I mean, that's actually not true. I've figured out ways to deal with it lately that seem to have been working, but up until recently, it's been bothering me a bit. So, what does this have to do with black and white thinking? Well, in terms of trying to deal with the problem, I tried to figure out obviously what was causing my mouth to be so dry that it was causing the saliva that was still there to clickety clack and all that. And it turns out that it was on a consequence of the two medications that I'm taking. One is Cymbalta
Hmm.
and the other is CBD oil. So it's like, okay, I can stop taking my medication and probably alleviate this problem, of which is driving me nuts. The fact that I can't solve it by any other means. But if I do that, I will be in pain, right? So, a couple weeks ago, when this particular thing was driving me so crazy, I didn't stop taking my Cymbalta because I know what the ramifications of that would be, and they're much worse than any comments that I get on YouTube. But I stopped taking my CBD oil, and all my physical pain started to come back with great force. And you guys that are listening right now could be all like, well, Max, that's totally irrational. Why would you do something like that? Wouldn't you rather not be in pain? And like it's it, like from the outside looking at it now, it does seem quite obvious. But when you're in that mindset, it's really difficult to think rationally about it. So, John, when you hear about a situation like the one that I described to you, it's quite it can get quite awful. Obviously, there are worse situations than the one that I just described. But how would you sort of advise somebody to not fall into the traps where you start thinking in such a way that can be quite self-destructive? Because that's another thing about black and white thinking. Once you get into that state of mind, you tend to be quite impulsive and make rash decisions that can really affect you. So how would you deal with something like that?
You have to stop and pause and recruit, as we said earlier, the front part of your brain and weigh. Okay, is all that pain worth it? Sometimes it might be. Sometimes it might not. But you can, if you have a feeling, an emotion, you can take that feeling, mark it down, and say, okay, I have that emotion. My rational brain recognizes I have that emotion of being fed up with this clicking. Okay, then you kind of it's like weighing which one is worse. If I take the CBD oil at this time, will the pain come back? You know, can I take it? Stop taking it long enough for the clicking to stop, or is there a way around that some other way? I would say, for instance, going back to the Yogananda thing, he would say, well, you know, go outside resources. Maybe people have resolved this in some different way.
Mm.
Um, so I noticed that in Delivered from Distraction, which is a book we've often referred to, there is a section on medications, their effects, and so on. So a person says, okay, I have this problem. Let me see what I can find out from some objective source somewhere where somebody else has faced that problem. And, oh, chewing on lollipops or sucking on mint leaves or something changes that. You know what I mean? So you
Mm.
make instead of going by the gut feeling and feeling your way through the problem, you sort of become you take on the Tao of a student and you say, okay, let me study this problem. let me get the information. I don't have the information. Let me find the information. And you do this very well when it comes to your videos and so on. So you do it with yourself. In other words, you become an object of your research or a subject for your research to
Ah.
that effect.
Hmm.
So you're turning it into a rational problem, and it started as an emotionally driven one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's maybe what I did originally when I made those truth about Asperger's videos, because what I was doing is I was just trying to articulate and create as many bullet points as possible about the things that I was going through. And I was approaching it like an essay, like a video essay, like any other video that I would
Ah,
do. And by doing
yeah.
that, it sort of nulled any effect that the emotional side had, almost, well, not instantaneously, but it might as well have been. But maybe that is something I should try, like writing down the problems. Uh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it then becomes a research piece as opposed to a threat.
Mm,
So it's no longer black and white thinking or anxiety driven thinking. It's you analyzing the anxiety and the sources of the anxiety. Last week, and we will talk about it again in one of the comments, people, we talked about cozying up to anxiety. In other words, understanding it,
mm,
getting near it. So the anxiety is telling you something. Oh, I have this problem. Ah, how can we address this problem? How can it be addressed? So it kind of changes the place you're looking from a place of like terror or frustration to a place of curiosity. Ah, I wonder how we can do this.
mm.
So, I mean, let's say somebody gets a terrible diagnosis, an illness that very serious and terrible illness. They can say, "Oh my God, oh it's horrible," and they can moan and groan, and that's reasonable, expectable. Or they can say, "Ah, okay, what's the prognosis? What's the treatment plan? What can we do? How can I ameliorate the effects?" They can kind of approach it in a more, I don't know, scientific or rational way,
Yeah.
and that kind of, you know, that kind of obviates the effect of the thing that's making you uh, feel concerned.
Uh, there's just well, first of all, excuse me. Welcome to Sapphire Rose, who's in the chat. She's asking, I'm new to this YouTuber. Who is the second person that isn't Max? That's John, Sapphire. He's the one that does all the work around here. I just ask all the obvious questions. Um, I'm being facetious. Yeah, absolutely. I agree, John. So it's actually interesting that I'm saying this right now because I didn't get a whole lot of work done today. It's mainly just because I've been working nonstop for the past couple weeks, what with the Shining video and the new video actually that I released yesterday, which is on Harlan Ellison's famous short story, I Have No Mouth and I Have No Scream. That's taken up a lot of my time. So I didn't do as much work today, but the work that I did do was I was thinking about doing another truth about type of video, but it wasn't going to be about Asperger's this time. It was actually going to be on anxiety. And just what we were talking about right now about writing down the problems and approaching them like you would approach something that you do in school or something, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I'd be curious if I evoke that solution, if that sort of thing might resonate with people that might listen to this future video. So, okay. Before we move on from this topic, I wanted to ask you one other thing in regards to this. In regards to this subject. So obviously, I gave you my personal example, John, about how to deal with black and white thinking. But I was just wondering, in regards to the people that you've dealt with in your practice, is that by the way, is that accurate? Is that an accurate way to classify it? A practice or just a job?
Yeah,
Practice. Okay.
it's a practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your practice with the people that you come across that have black and white thinking, can you think of like any notable ones off the top of your head where you've addressed the issue and it's been somewhat successful?
Yes, in cases where I've introduced the concept by the late Marshall Rosenberg of nonviolent communication, which teaches empathetic listening, which is something that your listeners would be doing on the Discord channel. But this chap, Rosenberg, in his book Nonviolent Communication, teaches you to listen to others with empathy. And when you do that, a lot of the sources of black and white thinking, anxiety producing black and white thinking, sort of get softer because you're listening to a person for them, not for ways you can trip them up. So some people listen and they're very clever. They sort of say, "Oh, I see a problem with what he said. I can jump on, I can pounce on, I can judge him on that problem." If you're thinking like that, if you're in the world of judgment, yeah, that tends to be black and white. But if you're thinking in a gentle way, okay, how can I help this person? They have a serious concern. Uh, Maybe I will listen to them with empathy. Maybe I'll listen to them and express myself in a nonviolent way. By the way, by nonviolent, I don't mean hitting them with axes and brooms.
Yeah.
I mean, I just mean in that judgmental way where you're trying to beat them up in words, or be better, or compete with them in some way. You know, the way some people drive their cars to see if they can get, ahead of you faster on the stoplights, or cut you off the corner, or not let you in. That kind of uh, tend violence. You see that in talking. So nonviolent communication, that approach of empathetic listening, is a very good way to soften the effect on yourself, because of course you can be gentle with yourself too.
Hmm. Yeah, speak to somebody. Another way, like just sort of a riff on what you just said there, John, that I found has helped reduce a lot of anxiety that could have killed me in the past was talking to people with the intent to fully understand what they're saying and making sure that the fact that they are heard and that you're reasoning with them is, well, be beneficial for them, but also beneficial for you. And a good summation of this basic principle, a lot of people don't like it when I evoke his name, but I really think this is correct. Jordan Peterson, one of, the 12 rules from his famous book is, speak to somebody as if they know something that you don't. And I found that when it comes to being able to make positive relationships with people across, various different religions, ideologies, political positions, I found that I've been able to maintain friendly acquaintanceships and friendships with these people when I just put forward that basic attitude. And when you do that, it minimizes a lot of the anxiety that can come along from social situations, and prevent you from getting into that headspace where you are fight or flight, or you are black or white. I didn't intend for that to rhyme, but you get the point. um, yeah, so is that essentially, like, that's the way that is that sort of, I'm getting tongue tied, I'm sorry guys. Another thing that's sort of bothering me, like the mouse sounds thing, is the fact that the last couple of shows I've been doing, I've been trying to make sure that this little frog in my throat doesn't affect my speaking. But anyways, back to the point. My summation there, John, does that sort of summarize what you were trying to say?
I think so.
Okay. Um, well, Ed, to the people that are listening, excuse me. I'm dying. To the people, not literally, to the people that are watching us live right now, I'm just curious, do any of you have any personal experiences that you'd like to share in regards to black or white thinking? Whether you're listening to us live right now or you want to comment on this video after the show is done, we'd love to hear from you. Just put your comments down below, or I'll keep an eye on the chat while we're doing this, because we're going to go for another 20 minutes and then, well, John has to leave because he's got a client to see. But before we do finish the show, and before we do read some of the things that you guys leave us, if you do, we do have a couple other things that we got to do. So we got mailbag. So every week, what John and I like to do, if there is mailbag to draw from, is go into the email inbox and read the emails that you guys send in about whether it's the Differently Wired show itself, or the mental health or autism related issues that you're dealing with. If you guys need advice or resources, we'd love to hear from you. And if you're wondering how you can get a hold of us, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is send in an email to the email that you see on screen, which is maxderrat@yahoo.ca. Once again, that's maxderrat, all one word, @yahoo.ca. Actually, just one other thing, real quickly, that I want to address before we actually read the emails. Lighthouse left a comment just a second ago saying, I think the truth is to stop worrying about the mouse sound. Haters have confronted me on the same thing, but have you heard Slavoj Zizek talk? He still earns respect. Yeah, well, Slavoj Zizek, as much as I might disagree with him, he's actually a smarter guy than I am, and a greater public profile. Uh, I don't know what point I'm trying to make with that, but generally, I guess, yeah, I agree with you, Light. Um, so let's get to the very first email that we got today. And the first email comes to us from Sean. And Sean actually happens to be one of the moderators for the Discord server. So thank you very much for sending this in, Sean. Okay, so he writes, Hey Max, how's life? That's great. Anyway, as far as I understand, cozying up to anxiety is like accepting the anxiety and getting used to its effects, which I think is very good. Anxiety is something I think is a part of an Aspie that I see as a good and bad thing. Good, because as Aspies, we are more sensitive to everything around us, pretty much positive and negative. This makes it so without anxiety, we would probably dig ourselves more of a hole socially, mentally, emotionally, and for some of us, physically and, God forbid, sexually. The anxiety stops us going too far and hurting ourselves more than we are able to deal with. It also gives us motivation for a change to strive for. But a bad part of it would be being dealt with social situations that scare us, and being anxious makes us targets for bullying and manipulation on top of the other issues that arise from autism anyway. Even without any outside effect happening, stuff like finding it hard to breathe, intense butterflies, vomiting, shaking, and also stutters, etc., happen, and that's just what happens. And so when anyone cozies up to anxiety, it doesn't null the effects, not by a long shot. But it at least gives us something to work on and something to overthrow to give us confidence. But it also limits us from going too far. So my question is, are there any possible downsides to cozying up to it, or is it just overall great? Well, obviously there's potential downsides. It's anxiety. It's just all about the way that you approach it. I'll sort of give the more like the most obvious answer to your question, John. Then I'll let John give his input. When it comes to cozying up to anxiety, obviously you don't want to jump in head first, right? Because if you're not cautious about it, if you just take the advice that we were offering on last week's show entirely literally, and you just give yourself completely over to anxiety, that's not cozying up to it. It's like jumping into the ocean without knowing how to swim, right? You got to know what you're going to do first before you cozy up to that anxiety, right? You got to know how to swim first before you jump into a pool of water. So you got to do it cautiously. If you happen to be quite a timid person, an agreeable person, and you're not very good about being assertive, if you have trouble with social situations, what you got to do is you got to take a gradual approach to this sort of thing. So I've given this advice and John's given this advice on past shows, but it bears repeating. If you have trouble with social situations, for example, and those things cause you anxiety, one way that you can approach this is by, let's say, you know that there's a social gathering nearby. You don't like social gatherings. You don't know what to do about them. They just make you feel terrible just to even think about them. Well, here's one thing that you can do. There's a social gathering nearby. You can go there, you can walk there, drive there, however, and just go there, stand there for 2 minutes, then go back home, and you consider that a victory, right? Then try it again, and you have to try it again because you got to keep up with this gradual increase of exposure to the thing that's causing you anxiety. You find another social situation. You go there, you walk up to somebody, you shake their hand, you go home. That's a win, in my opinion. Then you can do it again. You go up to the person, see if you can talk to them for 1 minute or even 30 seconds, whatever works best for you. But you just got to have that gradual increase to the thing. That's what I consider to be the most obvious way to approach it. John, like obviously, anxiety, you got to approach it cautiously. Any advice to Sean or anybody else that be wondering how to approach this whole coaching thing?
Well, I'm thinking if anxiety was a potential girlfriend for a fellow, you wouldn't immediately start kissing when you met it, when you cozied up. You would first have coffee, chat. You would, in some sort of measured way, get to know that person. So, in a way,
Wait, what? Really?
yeah,
Uh,
because
oh.
what you need to do, is kind of a parallel of what you said. You, if you want to get the message from anxiety, that it's telling you, but you have to listen to it in uh, an empathetic way. So if you do the opposite, then you run away from the thing. And if you only approach anxiety producing events by escaping them, it will be a problem for your whole life.
Hmm.
So it's better to get to know whatever that problem is coming from insofar as you can. And I like your approach of, social situations, handling it gently and very slowly. And that's quite sensible to me.
Hmm. By the way, when I was saying "what really" to John's approach regarding women, I was just joking. Please, for the love of God, don't think that I was implying that I did anything like that in the past. I'm not that socially or romantically ignorant. I promise. Um, yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for sending that in, Sean. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's move on to the next thing that we got here. Oh yeah. By the way, before I read this next email, which comes to us from Enigma Zero, I should preface this. So last week on the show, we were discussing presenting the strengths of people that are differently wired, the stories that people may have, and we put out a call on that show, obviously, but I also reminded people, hey, if there's anybody here in the Discord server that has any success stories that they can directly relate back to their struggles with mental health or autism, please send them to me so that we can address them on the show. And we've gotten a few of them, actually. We're only going to be addressing one today. And the reason why I did that was that I thought we would run out of time and only have time for one, even though we have 13 minutes left. But if you guys have any stories like that you would like to submit so that we could talk about it on the show and potentially inspire people, we'd love to hear from you. And once again, if you want to send that in, it's maxderrat@yahoo.ca. If you happen to forget that, it's in the description box below, I believe. Let me just check that real quickly. Yes. Wait. Yeah, it is there. Oh, thank God. I almost had a heart attack there. All right, so Enigma Zero writes, hi Max, Enigma Zero here. I like to share my personal success being a writer, although some backstory is needed for those who don't know me. I've written in previously, but for clarification, here's my story again. I was very nearly a nonverbal autistic when I was very little, about 3, long before I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I couldn't speak full sentences, I could only hold 5 words at a time. Whenever I would learn a new word, I'd lose one of the old ones. So 5 words was my maximum capacity at the time. My mother realized this issue and opted to use American Sign Language to teach me new words so I could communicate some of my needs. I only learned a handful of them, but that process was enough to jumpstart my language center, and from that point I began learning language the way I should have from the start. Today, I'm a published writer with an excellent vocabulary. While I still often lose words, it's far more manageable today than it used to be, and doesn't negatively affect my life. If anything, losing a word mid sentence is a minor annoyance, and one that can be circumvented by those who understand my thought process, or where I was going with a sentence or idea, which tends to be often. I'm living proof that early intervention can help, even though back when I was little, the concept was unknown. With that out of the way, I thought it would be good to share my actual work with everyone so everyone could see the difference between going from a kid who couldn't hold more than 5 words and couldn't form sentences to someone who writes stories/books. My work can be found at www.inkit.com/dpjr. Yeah, that's capital DPJ and then lowercase r. Otherwise, I don't think you guys are going to be able to get to his website. The main series I'm working on can be found at Commanders of the Galaxy. Same profile and site. I hope that's not a spiritual successor to Guardians of the Galaxy or a total ripoff. Because I'd hate to be promoting plagiarized material, but I don't think that's what you're doing here, anyway. I'm just joking. One of my short stories called Conformism and Conviction, found here, he wrote this with links included in the email, is a social commentary about autism and how people in the public view and treat autistic people. In that story, there were questions at the end written in for the character to comment on. It should be noted that every one of those questions were real questions, asked by people on a site I go to. This is just one of the ways I've tried to raise awareness about autism and the struggles associated with it. In any case, I hope my success and by extension my work will show people that progress is possible. And that's the end of the email. Thank you very much for sending that in, Enigma. That's quite you know, it's stuff like this that reminds me of not just the wonderful strength of the community that I'm able to speak to, or just the autistic community in general, whether they're people that are part of my audience or just out there in the world, how strong they all are. But it not only reminds me of that, it reminds me of the value that of the adversity that I've personally struggled through and had to overcome. Because maybe I should stop because I don't want to make this about me. I'll just summarize by saying this. It's like by reading stuff like this, Enigma, it sort of reminds me that, hey, a lot of us have come a long way. And in doing so, we should take pride in that fact, the fact that we are here and that we've gone through a lot more than a lot of other people have. And that in turn grants us character, more character than that of the average human. And we need to take pride in that. There's a lot of strength that can be drawn from that. Not so much so that, pride turns into a sin, but you get the point I'm making, right, John?
Hmm. I'm impressed with Mom. That's a real inspiration for her to
Yeah.
go around the problem. Now, she could have said, "Oh, woe is me, my little boy can't speak full sentences. Oh, I'll have to go to the pastor or the priest or the rabbi or social services and get him on some kind of disability because he's going to be nothing, everything." No, she
Mm.
didn't go that route at all. Just let me try something different. And look what happened. Magic. So that's impressive. And it's a great example of not using black and white thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you said, she could have just prayed to the rabbis who said that it would go away, or try to perform an exorcism, as some stupid people are wont to do with differently wired people. But she didn't. She confronted the problem head on. She cozied up to it, and she tried various different. Well, I'm assuming it wasn't just American Sign Language that your mother had to do, because being differently wired causes a complex set of problems. But she confronted them courageously, like a good mother would, and she helped you overcome this sort of stuff. John, in some of the videos that we that I've done and that we've done, there's been a couple of people suggesting that what we're trying to do is actually just trying to hone victimhood for people that are differently wired. That we're basically just trying to base uh, one's entire identity around their victimhood status. That's absolutely not the case. And I hope that by
That's
reading,
right.
yeah, reading stories like this, and if you guys continue to send them in, we can sort of try to dispel that stupid myth that, in fact, what we are trying to do is trying to get people to confront their fears, confront their anxieties, find cohesive and constructive ways to confront them, and in turn become actual productive members of society. So please send.
As superior, differently wired people have the ability to be very, very important in developing society, in developing new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching problems. So there's a lot to celebrate. It's a problem if there's lots of things that are a problem, but if you seize on those strong, good, differently wired, inspired things, that's great. I had a technical question, Max.
Yeah.
The links that Enigma sent, are they going to be available to the folks watching the show?
Oh yeah, there's a link to it right now in the description box below. So if you guys want to go and check out Enigma Zero's website, just it's right there. Just go click on it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
So before we conclude the show today, we have about 5 minutes left. I did say that I wanted to see what you guys were saying in the chat about the subject of black and white thinking. I did pause the chat around that time, so let's see what people are saying here. Rickety Split, my man, another one of my moderators on my Discord server, he said, "Me and my friend Shannon have noticed that our school makes us feel like we're failures if we don't get the best grades. It's not good for our mental health, especially for the two of us." Yeah, that's I certainly sympathize with you there, brother. Like, I remember numerous examples throughout my life where getting the best grades was of paramount importance to me, and when I didn't, I thought that the entire world was falling apart around me. Like, there's one example that I remember from my youth that I'll never forget how distraught I was. John, have you ever heard of a video game called Halo?
No.
No, okay. It's a shooter. It's like Doom or Wolfenstein. Probably haven't heard of those either.
A shooter? You mean like People shoot people.
Yeah, people shoot people.
Okay.
Yeah, Halo.
Werewolves or dogs or
Yeah, well, in this case, it was aliens. Uh,
oh, okay.
not the not
Of
not
course.
not the illegal kind. It's I meant the type that come from outer space.
But this wasn't a Republican show, eh?
No. Okay. No, Halo 2. I remember when that was coming out. It was November of 2004, and whether or not I was going to get the game was all dependent on how well I was performing in school. Because I think the game came out the same day that I got my report card. And from what I can remember, I got like A's on pretty much everything, but for the first time I think ever, I got a C in something, and it was in gym. And I thought that my entire world was going to fall apart when I showed my mother and my father that report card. But they helped me put things in perspective and realize that, hey, as long as you're excelling in the things that really do matter, um, like math, like science and English and stuff like that, then and as long as you try harder next time, as long as you make a concerted effort, this doesn't matter. Everybody's allowed to make mistakes, right? And ever since then, even though it's something that I continuously struggled with, it was something that I was always keeping in the back of my mind.
I've
Let's
noticed somebody sent in a super chat question.
Yeah, I just noticed it too. Point curation. He said, "Is it worth speaking your mind if most people think you're wrong most of the time? I think yes, but it's demoralizing, and I'm not sure how to overcome it." Um, that's a good question. I think it sort of depends on what people you're speaking to and what. Okay, let me read this again. Is it worth speaking your mind if most people think you're wrong most of the time? Well, who's thinking that you're wrong most of the time? Like, what are you speaking about? Why are you what's compelling you to speak up, right?
I got to jump in here because that's one of my hobby horses about communication. Is that when you're going to think about, say something, comment on something, you can say, is what I'm about to say of use to somebody? Is it serve a purpose? Now, if you were arguing over something that actually is just a disagreement of terminology, which you could look up in a dictionary or an encyclopedia, if there is any such thing anymore, or whatever, it's useless. People argue about, wasn't it a nice game? No, it was a rotten game. It doesn't matter. Like, that stuff doesn't matter. So what you do, point curation, is, I think, when you're about to speak and you're not sure, when it comes to your mind, you're not sure if it's worth speaking. Is there any point? What purpose is going to be served by this thing? Now, when you do speak, yes, I think you're right. You have to speak your mind. You can't speak somebody else's mind or try to please people. That's where you get into big trouble, when you try to say the right thing to make the right sound that'll fit. Then you're not speaking your truth. You're trying to guess at somebody else's truth. So that gets incredibly tangled.
What if it's your wife and she asks you if this dress makes her look fat, John?
Oh, you say, of course not, darling.
Yeah.
Because the first rule is, what is the purpose of this communication? Well, the first purpose is not to get an iron frying pan in the head.
Right. It's John speaking from experience. No,
Totally.
or just speaking for all men from experience. Yeah, point curation. Thank you very much for sending in that $5 super chat. We really do appreciate it. And look, if you want to continue this conversation further, I'm pretty sure you are in my Discord. I do see you quite frequently in my comment sections, and I'm grateful for that. I'd love to continue this conversation with you. And Lighthouse says that's why I have plastic frying pans.
That is cute.
Well, I mean, like, even if they're plastic, I mean, like, they could still do quite a bit of damage if they've been on the oven for quite some time.
She still looks gorgeous, even at 472 pounds.
Yeah. She doesn't listen to this, does she?
Right.
Otherwise, you'd be dead right now.
Yep.
I think I can hear it coming. Let's finish the show then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Differently Wired show, episode 39. It was great to do this again. Listen, I just want to remind you, if you guys have at any time a question that you want to send in, or a story, or some sort of motivational material, we'd love to hear from you. All you have to do to send that in is send it to this email address, maxderrat@yahoo.ca. Listen, if you want an audio version of this podcast, it is available. It just goes back to what I was saying before about the Subscribe Star campaign. I'll bring it up on screen for you guys now. If you want an audio version of the show, it's very, very easy to get it. It's very, very cheap. It just costs $1 per month. That's it. The amount of money that you'd spend in a year on getting the audio version of the podcast would cost you about as much as you'd spend on a meal at McDonald's nowadays, right? Roughly. So, and plus it just helps keep this type of stuff going. It helps us reach out to other people that might require that type of support that they aren't getting from traditional services, and it brings people into our community. And I've gotten a lot of messages from people that are in the Discord server saying that coming here has been a great decision. It's made them feel welcome, and it's made them feel like their condition isn't a problem, that they can be appreciated for things that have nothing to do with that, for reasons that don't have to do with that. So just by making that simple, near free contribution, it really helps us out more than you might possibly realize. But anyways, I understand, like, not everybody has the financial means, and that's totally, totally cool. As I always say, the best thing that you guys can do to support this channel and support the work that John and I do is by taking this video, or any of the other Differently Wired videos, or any of the other videos on my channel, and sharing them with somebody. Sharing them with somebody that might enjoy it, somebody that might need it. That really is the best thing that you guys can do. And before you go, if you haven't liked the stream, I've seen you guys are, I'm not even having to tell you guys, which I'm very, very proud of you. I keep saying this, but it bears repeating. My audience is filled with so many smart, beautiful people. That they're so receptive. I appreciate you all so much. But just in case you haven't liked the stream yet, please like it. It really does help us out. I want to thank John. John, thank you so much as always. I know you got to get to your client.
Thank you.
And,
Gotta get going. Yep.
and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, please stay yellow.